Hi.
I hope I'm audible.
Yes, me too.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Hi.
So, hello everybody. Uh, I think me and Prashasti are here, and then I see a lot many people joining in. So we have more than 40 people here. Oh, now it is 51. So I think let's start in another minute because you know I just thought of giving 5 minutes for people to kind of go and click the link and do their mathematics with the Google Meet link. So let's start in a minute. Yeah, Wesley, I think we can start now. So
Okay,
good to
good.
go.
Yeah. So I would start with introducing Siddharth. He is the director and founder of Design Factory India. He has done his graduation in architecture, followed by product design from IIT Kanpur, and then initiated Design Factory India as a platform to do various things. And I think that's something that's unique for the platform as well, that he works in interiors and architecture as well as heritage and urban spaces, then to brand communication. So I think there is a big vast array of things that he does. And I think what's unique about him is the way he looks at a project, or the way he approaches any opportunity that comes to the table. So always trying to look it from an overall perspective, from different angles, and also then to try and integrate the user with the function in different mediums. So be it a book or a graphic or a space or the flooring of that space. So it's a wide array, and I think that's special about it. Yeah. And I and Siddharth have been working together for almost 7 years now. So there is a lot more that I can tell, but I don't think we have the time enough, and we should across the presentation you'll get to know more.
Yeah, so thanks, Prashasti. Uh, I introduced Prashasti now. I hope I'm audible.
Yes, to me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay. So, Prashasti Chandra, she is the design director at Design Factory. She has done her pro design from NIG, um, and I have seen her uh, quite practically after she passed out from NID, and then wanted to do something for the farmer markets in Uttar Pradesh, and that's how she joined Design Factory. And then she's been working on a lot of different projects, right from farmer markets to urban spaces to interiors to a lot of museums. Uh, and what I know about her is that her keen interest is to stitch narratives and stitching in space, stitching in products, stitching in the overall environment. Yeah, so that is what Prashasti Chanda is all about to me. Uh, and yeah, so and today we are talking about a very sensitive projects and topic which is heritage, which is very close to both of us. At the same time, we will talk about that how IPHD as a program will help to do a lot of heritage projects in future and through the program itself. Yeah, so what we will be doing is that we thought that you people can get bored after listening to us for an hour. So it is good to share some visuals. So we have a small presentation and probably we will stitch around our narratives and story around that presentation going from one place to another through some visuals. Yeah,
Yeah. I'll just share now.
yeah, please.
So is my screen visible?
Yes, it is visible.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think as we started brainstorming as to what is heritage, I think the first question that came to our mind was to understand why heritage is important altogether. And I would request Siddharth to share his thoughts on why, as to why does he think heritage is essential in our lives.
Yeah, uh, I think heritage is something which kind of guides us, and history and stories are there with us since ages, and then everything which is built here will be history tomorrow. So I think heritage projects in India, especially, are very important for the reuse, for conservation, for preservation, because India has a great history. And then you talk about this sector as tourism; it is one of the biggest sectors. Uh, and I'm totally shocked and surprised on the way Indian heritage has been kept with versus to the kind of numbers we have here. So, like for example, daily 10,000 people visit Red Fort, which is crazy. 10,000
Yeah,
people daily. It's like it's uh, double or triple the amount of a mall we are talking about. And then
yeah,
we have Taj Mahal, where we have 25,000 people coming daily. So they are huge numbers. A lot of people, because of tourism, because of recreational, do visit this heritage, and it is very important to kind of understand this heritage and preserve it and stitch it together for people to know what the future is all about and what the past was.
yeah. And I think adding up to that, that these the heritage buildings and the heritage environments are like the pride points of people who are living there or visiting there, and they add kind of a an identity to the entire city and to the country. So it's important that we look after those monuments of pride with equal pride and dedication. So I think, yeah, that's what the importance of heritage is.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
So I think uh, we have seen and done a lot of projects in India, right from Red Fort to Qutub Minar to Gateway of India to Fatehpur Sikri, and we have kind of tried to stitch this story, and we have always seen that how one heritage is another from another heritage, and what all it needs to be done to take it to the next level.
Yeah. So I think I'll move on to the next agenda or next discussion. So how do you approach a project if it is a heritage project or any project for that matter? What is the beginning point? Do we start at, a survey or a vision or maybe figuring out the budget? What is it? So yeah, I'll go through the slides and so that you could probably shed light on some light on all of them. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think, yeah, so I think one heritage project is totally different from another heritage, and I think on the upper level, one need to be very clear about what is the vision, why we are doing that monument, and of course, preserving a monument is one thing, but I think there is a lot more than the preserving itself. It is the reuse, it is the redevelopment, and what the heritage needs, because the site condition of different heritage are totally different, and how you take to the next level, which in today's time is also what you need to think. Like museums were not there 1,000 years ago, So, does the monument need a museum? Does the monument need lighting? Does the monument need an approach road, etc., etc.? So these questions are very important, and it totally, you need to be flexible, and I think you need to be free while you're thinking that what a heritage need, and that's what gives you the fresh thoughts that how one heritage is totally different from another. So, like we did this whole iconic study with the one of the most prestigious projects we have done with the redevelopment of Taj Mahal area. Yeah, just even go to the next slide. Yeah, so here you see that the problems and the methodology were totally different. So one problem was that if you can see my cursor, that Taj Mahal is the place where everybody gets into when it comes to Agra, and they see the Taj Mahal and then they go out. So that's the challenge, that how you make sure that the people who are here at Taj Mahal itself, go to different monuments. So that's a beautiful brief of redeveloping Taj Mahal in that sense. Uh, at the same time, you see that Taj Mahal, once upon a time, was of course very much connected to the Red Fort, which is here, and then the 16 gardens and monuments across Yamuna, which is not there. So everybody goes to Taj Mahal, see the Taj Mahal, and go back. They come from a Shatabdi or a Taj Expressway, and then they go back in the evening itself. So how you make sure that this Taj Mahal gets connected to the other side of Yamuna, which is the Mehtab Bagh, and then how this whole beautiful trail of 18, 16 monuments get connected to each other. So that was a great challenge. So we thought of connecting through a pontoon bridge and connecting all the monuments and of course connecting it with the Red Fort itself. Then there were challenges that people come to Taj Mahal, but the approach road doesn't have much to serve. Not to the kids, not to the elderlies, or not to the tourists who are just not coming to see the Taj Mahal itself. So there's a huge garden near the Taj Mahal itself, which is the Taj Nature's Walk, and how you can connect that part with the overall scenario. At the same time, uh, uh, what we did was we planned a huge museum there, which is one of the biggest museum, which is the Agra Museum in the same precinct, and the introductory place of Taj Mahal where people will buy the tickets. That's the Taj Invitation Center. So how the challenge of people, a lot of amount of people, the biggest amount of tourists which you get to a place in India can have a museum of Taj Mahal, a museum on Agra, and then a huge park to see at, and of course go to Taj Mahal. And with that, Taj Mahal gets connected to 16 other monuments, like which happens in many cities. So that was the challenge here.
Yeah.
Uh,
So I think it
whereas,
also depends that you need to, so from varying from project to project, how the right questions need to be asked and what are the different aspects that need to be looked at depending on the side, the value of the heritage that is already there in people's mind. So yeah, I think the next example is quite contrary, and how it was a different case totally from Agra.
yeah, so if I talk about Fatehpur Sikri, uh, it's a different challenge altogether. Everybody goes to Taj Mahal and Fatehpur Sikri, of course, for architecture students and architects, they love the building more than Taj Mahal itself, and how to make sure that people are coming to Fatehpur Sikri, which is around just 40 minutes away from Taj Mahal. But the kind of tourist which comes to Fatehpur Sikri is drastically low as compared to Taj Mahal itself. So what we planned was that how people can be trapped at Taj Mahal itself, and they can have a hop and hop off service, or if they can have a cycle tour from the Taj Mahal itself to Fatehpur Sikri. And then Fatehpur Sikri as a site is a totally different and dynamic site. You have nothing around. You have so much to offer where people can actually stay at night. So you can, there's already a Taj Khema restaurant and a hotel there. How to redevelop there? How to have a big museum and a convention center where people can come and can treat this overall site into a different scenario. How there was a vacant site near Fatehpur Sikri which used to be a water body. How you regenerate that water body itself. In Fatehpur Sikri, the architecture what it's at peak at the Mughals time, and how the architecture was very much related to the function which was offered, and there's a lot of culture which was devoted to Fatehpur Sikri itself. So how you can have night shows, how you can have night tourism. So again, the scenario and the solutions of monuments totally changes.
Yeah. And then coming to Delhi, which is an entirely different kind of a setup. It's the city with the maximum heritage monuments, but yet each of them have a very special place in everybody's heart. So how do you sort of address that?
Yeah, so again, Qutub Minar was totally different in the sense that Qutub Minar is one of the first mosques with the Kawat Islam Mosque, which was built 1,000 years ago. And then the mosque was built breaking up the temples of Qila Rai Pithora, and the site of Qila Rai Pithora which still exists. So you see the Qutub complex here, and then you see the Qila Rai Pithora here. So you know how to regenerate this whole scenario of Qila Rai Pithora, and then how Kila Raya Pithora need to be relived itself, and Qutub complex, of course, need to be conserved. So the stories are different at different monuments, and the solutions are totally tailored to the need of that time. Yeah. So here you
Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, so here you talk about the entry point. So I don't know how many of you have been to Qutub Minar. So there is a parking place here. There you get parked and you take the tickets, but there's no entry from the place you take ticket from to the entry to the Qutub Minar itself. And there's a hard road where the bus is also parked and the bus also travels. So the kind of a scenario that how you can reshift the overall traffic flows and people can actually buy the ticket and without any uh, pass by on the road can get into the monument. And then the whole story of Qutub Minar is just not the Minar, but there are three complexes to enjoy and to get to know by the user itself. And then there's a huge Alai Minar which is there. So and how you make sure that people are into the campus, they have a museum, they have probably a light and sound show at night, and then Qutub Minar is iconic. You see this Burj Khalifa and famous monuments in the world being lit up at night, like the Eiffel Tower also, and they have this lighting every hour, or they have a projection mapping show, which is kind of a video being displayed on the monument, or you have a Indian flag being displayed on the monument itself. So kind of scenarios like this can be posted, which is very visible, and a lot of tourists come to these places.
And then, of course, the Fort of India. I think it's difficult to kind of ignore the site and what all we've been doing on it. So yeah. So for the Red Fort, of course, it's a big context. You have to look at the entire city of Shahjahanabad and how that is being connected through various elements to the Red Fort. So being the Jama Masjid or the Chandni Chowk or the precinct around Red Fort to the inside. So there are these 100 levels of interventions, and to be able to understand what is, so it's not just addressing the site itself, but also the nearby areas, the access to it, the services, how we can facilitate maximum services and functions into that space so that it becomes more and more relevant for people who are visiting the monument, also for people who are living in the vicinity and trying to figure out programs for each of the categories and the duration. So, figuring out a person who could maybe spend a week at the Red Fort to understanding the Red Fort in an hour or two. So I think that's the array of agendas that need to be looked at while looking at a heritage site of this importance.
Yeah. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think it is very, very important that how Red Fort gets connected to Chandni Chowk, and then there's a lot many redevelopment which need to happen inside the Red Fort. You have British barracks being installed by demolishing 60% of Red Fort at during
Yeah.
1857. So it's very important to see the monument like that. Yeah, and I
Yeah.
think, yeah, I'm just kind of also thinking that how a scenario of IPHD students can build in here. So I was thinking that we do these a lot of heritage projects, and uh, but uh, but there is something which is very core to it, which is the practical scenario of looking at the monument, because this is something which was built thousands of years ago, and whatever you do need to be very, very serious and practical. So this is where I think an IPHD program can function very well, where students will get to know the sensitivity and the responsibility one has as a designer, as an architect, to get into something like this.
Yeah. Definitely.
Yeah. So
So I
here,
think and then
yeah. So
please
here,
continue.
what you see is the red part is the famous rampart, where the prime minister take the speech on the Independence Day, and then you have these wonderful gardens on both sides, and you see that how these gardens are encroached by the Nauchandika Mela or the Ram Mela which happens here. So the whole idea was how to shift that Mela across to a different place, and what all can be done here. At the same time, Chandni Chowk is a huge area with a lot of people and no green space. So, but you have the green space here all around Red Fort. So how people at Chandni Chowk can come to the green space and they can enjoy and have their lovely garden or jog at this place. So you see a huge mass in Chandni Chowk have nothing to breathe about, and then just in front of Chandni Chowk you have this huge green area. So how a monument can serve as an urban space, that is something which was very important. At the same time, you have this Salimgarh Fort on the right hand side, which was built before the Red Fort itself, was nobody goes there. So how Salimgarh Fort can have a different branding altogether, and then you have a different entry and exit points to that, because that's very close to Yamuna. And then you have these 8 barracks which were built by Britishers, demolishing the buildings at the Red Fort. How these barracks can function in today's time, and that is how beautifully we thought that these barracks can be the today's time museum, because Red Fort anyway is second visited monument in India right now, and how these different monuments can different barracks, different British barracks can be converted into museums, and suddenly you have 8 built-in museums in the Red Fort. So practically, we have Subhash Chandra Bose and 1857 museum right here, and then we are doing the National Museum there, and then we have a beautiful information center being planned there also.
Yep. So I think the next agenda that we arrive to, that once the vision is done, it's a 100 solutions, but how to actually translate those solutions into reality, and the challenges that all of us face in challenges. And I think it's a no-brainer that there are 100 challenges, but the way we could overcome them is what's important. Yeah. So I would just take you through a few examples of projects that have been executed with a lot of passion and sincerity, and how we had gone about it. Yeah, so this is the master plan for Hussainabad, which is the old Lucknow. It's a 1.3 kilometer stretch approximately, which has the Rumi Darwaza right here, if you can see my cursor. And there are another 10 monuments that have been there always, but nobody had ever sort of witnessed them, because they were all divided into these secluded campuses, and nobody looked at the bigger picture. But what we tried to do was to connect this entire path into one curated kind of a walk, which through which people could really understand the essence and also enjoy the views that you get here. So
Yeah.
this is how Hussainabad and the Rumi Gate used to look before.
Yeah, I think it's a very important picture, because this is what our heritage is right now. So if you can see
Yeah,
that how these heritage places were first built, they were built as towns, and they used to have 10, 11 monuments, which were all connected. It used to be like a Rajwada, or it used to be like a fort, or it used to be like a town. And slowly what happened is Chandni Chowk or a Hossainabad area, that these monuments were isolated from each other, and then you have these monuments being encroached with a boundary wall, and then the roads came in, and then you have these ugly looking light poles in between. So I think the scenario was to how to get away with these boundary walls and encroachment on all sides, and then get away the lighting, the electrical poles and roads and encroachments all from the side, and then how to reconnect these monuments in its earlier glory, but with the interventions of today time, with the perspectives of contemporary design.
yeah.
Yeah, and this is what it is right now. So if you see that how the encroachment on both sides of Rumi Darwaza, and people from Lucknow will know that Rumi Darwaza, people think that is the middle part only, because they never saw both the parts on both sides, because they were all encroached. So opening
Yeah.
up the whole Rumi Darwaza, getting the road aside and coupling the overall surface, getting in beautiful street lights which actually goes with the Rumi Darwaza itself, is a great urban gesture which you have given to the city as well as the Darwaza itself. Uh,
Yeah.
and you see a huge jump between what it was earlier and what it is right now. Yeah,
Just to
this
give
is what
to give a,
it
yeah.
is the plan. Yeah. So how it has been open now on both sides. Then the people come to go to Bada Mambada and go back. So I think it was very important for people to know about that there are 11 monuments here. So what we did was we kind of implanted this bigger map, which is around 15 meters. It's huge in front of Bada Imam Bada, so people can get to know, oh, this is the plan of next 1 kilometer, and there are 11 monuments in the elevation itself, which kind of understand that where you're coming from and then where you need to lead to. Yeah, Prashti, if you can talk about how probably here the materials kind of plays a very, very important role.
Yeah. So I think it was really important for us to pick materials and textures that would go with the entire space, and how it should not look like it's a, it's a it has to be a contemporary gesture, but with a certain kind of sense into it. So I think cotton steel came out to be just the right element with the right materiality, which could give it the essence of being a heritage, as well as being a very very contemporary gesture as well, and then supporting using it in different ways to be able to do inform people through stories, through graphics, illustrations, complementing it with very contrasting stainless steel, but only to highlight the story and not to overtake the space. I think that's how we sort of went through this entire project, and then this the same typology and materiology was used in the entire walk for signages, wayfindings, other story pecks of stories across the entire path. So how each of the poles had a signage aligned with the monument, narrating their story, what is special about it. So, for example, the all these most of the monuments that are here were built. So this was built just a meter lower than the Big Ben of London by the Britishers to sort of tell that the head is there. And I think it's really important for us to understand what lies behind these monuments and why were they built, how they were built, why are they relevant today, and that stitches the entire thing together. And I think it gives much more value to the visitor rather than just looking at it and maybe probably taking pictures of it and going back. I think if they take back a message with them, it's really helps in evolving the society, all of us together.
Yeah.
And then, so there was this Satkhanda building, which you would see would have only 4 floors, and then how this whole building was repurposed and reused for a cause that could help out people. It has been translated into like a watchtower because it's strategically located that you can see all around the Heritage Walk and the Husainabad complex, and each of these windows face into the direction of at least one of the monuments. Yeah, and then we also said that it could be a place of celebration and gathering where at the evening to promote night tourism, we planned a projection mapping show which narrates the story of the entire space in a brief 15 to 20 minutes of a film, which we have come to understand as the best medium to entertain and educate everybody, because it just involves the people into the story. And we all know that Bollywood is the most influential media, communication media, and that's how that could be integrated into the heritage spaces and looked at.
Yeah, I think this slide is very important because see what is happening right now is that this is a monument built 100 years ago and hundreds of years ago, and then it is practically very important that we live in today's time and we design something of today's time. So that is how the idea came into, and I think that will be very influential for the students also. I think the students are of today's time, and then they will probably think that what is the future and define the future itself. So how architecture as a gesture is not only connected to hardcore buildings and cement and mortar, but you need to think of a vision level once you enter the industry. Only one silo will not work. You need to think of multi-silo problems and solutions, and how something like a projection mapping can define and reflect an architectural project so beautifully is something which is worthwhile understanding. And I think that is what the whole program will reflect on about that how you need to live up to today's time, and then what is the future practice of architecture is all about.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is the shot of the current scenario where you see all the boundary walls are gone and then everything is connected and of course lit up at night. Yeah, you see Rumi Darwaza being lit up at night itself. Again, I've been talking to people in Lucknow itself. They also never used to go to this area because of the sheer encroachment, and then they don't get time in the day itself. So if the whole Hussainabad is lit up at night now, and there's no encroachment, so people who are off the office after 6, 7 can beautifully go to this place and can enjoy a good walk. And suddenly you have given
Yep.
something so beautiful which was a part of the city back to the city.
Yeah, definitely. I think because a lot of people, I think the challenge that everybody faces is that where else to go if not a mall at night. And I think opening up these spaces in the city just leverage and give an opportunity to the citizens to really enjoy the space and live to the fullest. Yeah. And then I think complementary functions are absolutely necessary. So how a museum has been planned to sort of understand the history of Hussainabad in itself because it's super rich. I think in India every nook and corner has a relevant history, and we all should and need to know each of these stories. So yeah, I think museum that's how a museum becomes totally relevant. And that's how we come to the next project, which was Tajganj. So as you already see, Taj Mahal at the backdrop, and what we tried to address was the approach to the Taj Mahal and what all functions could be integrated, how it could be made more pedestrian friendly, what all stories could be integrated on the path. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think I will like to reflect upon a very important issue in this slide here. Let's see if we can go to
Yes.
the back slide. Yeah,
Yep.
I think lighting plays a very important role. Again, everything is very important and mature to think of, which is something which you have to learn when you are into industry, and especially this for the students out there that in architecture studies, of course, it is beautiful, but we miss out a lot of practical issues which are a hardcore part of design, which are the services. So whether it is HVAC, which we will show you that how it has a huge impact in heritage in another project, but whether it is HVAC or electricals or lighting, these all plays a very important role. So how here the lighting was something which was not to shout about. You can't lit up the Taj Mahal at night because of some orders, but once you are going to the Taj Mahal itself, you cannot shout. So the whole lighting scheme was to lit up the road rather than lighting up the buildings or lighting up the approach road. So how you see the whole road is lit up very in a very subtle way. So that is how you approach towards the Taj Mahal rather than having big hoardings or big poles of light to pollute the whole environment.
Yep.
Yeah, this is the current into the Taj Mahal itself. Again, getting all the encroachments. Material again is very important. In our studies, we study material, but once we are into a practical field, and then we do a lot of on-site studies. I think material is the lifesaver. If you think of the material right and the joinery right, it's gonna be making the best project out of it. If you don't think of the material, then there is no way that you can have a physical environment done well. And that is how we do collaborate with a lot of people. So for this project, we actually collaborate with Topotech, with one which is one of the biggest architectural and landscape firm in the world. And then yeah, we also did collaborate with Devo Chipperfield for the Agra Museum, which of course I think the students at the IPHD program also will get to work with.
Yep. Absolutely. I think, but understanding the functions and then addressing it through materials is really important, and that's what I have personally learned in the 7 years. And and I think it comes only when you're working on the project and you are there sitting with the people who are using the space on a daily basis, understanding their needs, but also not following their needs, trying to create a balance between the two. And yeah, I think that's how you have to approach the project.
Yeah, and I think, yeah, if you can just go behind, I'm
Yeah,
sorry. So I
no
think,
worries.
and everything has a reason and a function attached to it. So how the size of the rich sandstone flooring should not be a stone of 2 meters by 2 meters or a 2 feet by 2 feet. How we thought of the cobble of a size of 100 mm by 100 mm, what it does, uh, what it does to the practical language of the overall project, then how the lighting which you see is rich sandstone, but it's a replica uh, of the lighting which is done inside the Taj Mahal, but the positive and the negative is being played for. And what is the boundary wall or no boundary wall, which is the pedestals and the road itself. So I think this all is very important. What is the language of architecture? And this all is evolved once you do a practical project and you see things on site.
Yeah. Should I move to the next one?
Yeah. Yeah,
And
and
then
this is what it
obviously
was,
look.
and this is what it is right now. Yeah.
And then I think creating symmetry and synergy in the entire space. So also looking at branding, how the entire facades can have their own identity, but yet speak the same language. Clean up the entire space so that it becomes pedestrian friendly again with minimal encroachment. You're able to see the heritage. So the city is also part of the heritage, and how we can preserve and reuse that is I think, as important as the monument itself.
Yeah, and I think if you see the details in the light also, so again, you need to think through that how the street lights need to be designed. It cannot have the nakashis or the nitty-gritties of Taj Mahal, because you cannot compete with Taj Mahal itself. It need to be as minimal as possible. You need to respect Taj Mahal. So this is the main entry to the Taj Mahal itself, which is the North Gate, and how you see the lighting is being designed is as minimal as possible. It's just a stick coming out, which is kind of doing the minimal job what it meant to be.
Yeah. Yeah, and then I think addressing, as I said, mentioned before, branding. So looking at the overall picture and seeing that what is the story that the space is telling, and how do we include the city into the story of the monument. So we said that obviously Taj Mahal is iconic and everybody knows about it, but Agra is the city which holds and has lived through a long past. How do we combine the two, and so that the narrative becomes cohesive to the entire space? And that's how the branding of Agra was done with this with the logo of A, which has the Taj embedded in it, because it's almost impossible to ignore the Taj Mahal from Agra, but there is a lot more to Agra than the Taj Mahal. So that was the entire approach to creating a brand of the city. And then the most important step was to apply that brand and make it visible and make it everybody's brand in the city. So you would see the A of the logo being imprinted across the Tajganj, so that people start relating and owning and safeguarding it. Yeah.
Again, you see the bench itself. It is the minimal it can be. It is one red sandstone and two marble pieces, which is again getting to the contemporary times, and then how the logo was used in middle. So why the material is such and why the design is such is something which is very very important to think. And I think when you're thinking of urban heritage, it is not just the urban heritage, it is the design of a bench, to a design of a dustbin, to design of a light, to thinking that how you will brand the overall city. What is the future? How people will get to know that they need to go and visit that place, and that is how the branding and the city branding was designed, and then how the logo of the city was there with all the shops near the Taj Mahal itself. So I think as architects, we need to think or as designers, we need to think ourselves as people who will create the next vision, who will create the next world. So I think that's very important to think multidisciplinary.
Yeah. So I think we are going really bad on time.
Yeah, so we'll probably
We
speed up. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so this is how the logo of A being pushed and right there as you walk towards the Taj Mahal itself, and the stories of Taj Mahal was written on those bigger A's with QR code, and how a typography was also derived out of the brand identity, and how an arrow also is a derivative of the same logo. This is the Taj Orientation Center, which is where you take the ticket and then go to Taj Mahal itself. Uh, so you are designing the program also. Next. This is the Agra Museum, which I was talking about. This is designed, yeah, with Arcom and Deva Chipperfield being the main architects. And then again, it was all about the language, which is very, very contemporary rather than being of the old times, still respecting the overall scenario.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is what it is inside. Next. Yeah, this is Gateway of India. Again, here the scenario was that people come to this place. It has a good depth of people enjoying the visuals of Gateway of India, but at the same time, that how people can get to know the story of Gateway of India. So what we did was we did projection mapping in Gateway of India. Next. Yeah, so this is projection mapping, which is a permanent show, which is in Hindi and Marathi, which happen every evening, and then carving a museum space on the basement, so we don't disturb the overall plaza, which is beautifully designed in front of Gateway of India. So thinking of a museum which is inside the plaza, so you don't disturb the plaza, and then you have something like a light and sound show, a projection mapping show every evening, so people can get interested in knowing the history and the story of Mumbai. Next. Yeah, so I think, firstly, I think here I will, I will like you to probably explore that how to zoom in into something which is not of a bigger urban scale, but a small building, and how the heritage of that building can be preserved and reused through one of the
Yeah.
examples.
Okay. So I will try to be concise, so we stay in this time limit.
Yeah.
So, so in the Red Fort, as Siddharth pointed out earlier, that there are multiple things and interventions that have been ongoing, from making three museums already on Subhash Chandra Bose to 1857 to the National Museums, and the Information Center is what we are trying to zoom in today to get a better understanding. So this is the barrack which we wanted to create the information center on, because as you see, you enter the fort from here, and this is the first building that you sort of approach after moving out from the Chhatta Chowk, and it served as the best place to get an orientation to the entire campus and to get an understanding as to what Red Fort is all about. And then this was the condition, it was being used as an office, and obviously it's been there for more than 100 years now, and without once you are not visiting the space every day, the condition deteriorates. So there were multiple aspects and levels of intervention that we did, so from starting from experience design to uh, looking at conservation integrated with services, looking at the business model, and in understanding how the space would operate, and how many people would be coming here, and what kind of business sense it needs to make. Because I think when we talk about sustainable tourism, it's also important that these spaces become self-sustainable and are not relied on fundings from sources, because it's not never going to last that long. So being able to create a comprehensive program, then looking at installations and graphics to support the information that we are trying to provide to people with film and video, and then also looking at all the legalities, the permissions, the access, all in all together as a one big chunk. So I would like to start with the experience design, where we're saying that what is it that, I think the first question that we ask ourselves is what is the purpose of the information center, and what is it that people want to take back with them. So one, of course, was the most important aspect of understanding the culture and architecture of the Red Fort in itself. What are the stories? What was the life that people used to have? What was the architectural planning of it? Why is it? Why are the ways the way they are? So, for example, the hammam is the largest building in the royal court of Shah Jahan. So, what is the purpose of that? What was their mindset and culture and style of living? So that, and then looking at the outer perspective of understanding what is the relationship between the fort with the immediate city of Shahjahanabad, of which it was the capital, to Delhi and to India, because Red Fort is now commonly known as the Fort of India. So why is it, and how has it, got that position and that power in its periphery? And then looking at what are the kind of people coming, what are the visitors, what time are they coming, and then figuring out what is the kind of footfall that we are expecting at this place, and then placing the program in context to the visitors. So as you look at the plan, you will see this is the Chhatta Chowk from where people would enter, and this is the Naubat Khana where they sort of go as the second entry into the Red Fort. And we wanted the information center to become a very integrated part of this route. So we made sure that there are, walkways that would allow people to sort of just pass through the center, even if not visit the whole thing, so that they could at least know what all is there in there and how it could be useful or helpful or interesting for them to visit the entire campus. And then looking at the services and programs, so figuring out spaces where the ticketing could happen so that there is enough space of queuing, because the kind of number of visitors that you would be getting, there is no space to eat inside the Red Fort, and with the amount of visitors and the culture that we have as Indians of enjoying the culinary experiences. So, giving enough and ample space for eating, then creating certain kind of showstoppers to being able to give the whole story of the Red Fort in a nutshell, as well as to create some interactive experiences through augmented reality, etc. And then to create space for people to shop, because that, I think, secondary to eating is shopping is what people enjoy the most. And to going to the extent of curation and to what kind of products should be sort of staged here, which are relevant to the context. So we don't want to sell a Levi's jeans over here, so creating products that address and have a narrative to themselves. And then the first floor was visualized more like an information center, which takes the people through the entire story of the Red Fort. So if you go through this space and then visit the monument, you would have a better and deeper understanding of the entire context of the Red Fort. And then looking at the immediate boundary and vicinity of the information center and trying to integrate functions in the outdoor plaza as well, so putting a big sculpture of the Red Fort with Shahjahanabad, because a lot of people don't know that Shahjahanabad and Red Fort are integrated. So I think it was an important puller of crowd that we had to place this monument model here, and then how they sort of get directed into the museum, into the spaces, onto the first floor, and then finally exit into the Red Fort. And then looking at conservation, so this was the state of the building. It was really depleted. All the wood was almost good to taken out. Then the ceiling, the bricks, the plaster, everything was deteriorated. And then we started doing the study of the other barracks and trying to understand what is the language and what was actually the original state of these barracks when they were built. And looking at the joinery, the material finishes, the textures, how the keystone was, what was the arch like, what were the window treatments like, and trying to make it as original as possible, but also being responsible enough to understand the context and the immediate context of Red Fort, and not trying to make it stand out a lot. So this was the proposal for the renovated building, and somehow there was. I think it's important here to understand that there are a lot of stakeholders in the process, and how do you sort of communicate with the officials, with the client, and your own design sensibilities to create a solution that is agreeable and approachable and doable for all. So this was the first approach, and then this was the second additional proposal which was done in order to make it talking to make this building talk to the other barracks that had already been conserved in the past, and trying to create a dialogue between the different elements of the space itself. And this is how the center building looks like today, where everything has been scraped off, all the plaster has been taken off, and natural lime has been used. There has been breaking, pointing, everything has been done to sort of try and restore the originality of the monument into the building itself. So, Siddharth, what should we do? I think we have 5 minutes left, so we could pause here and take the questions, or
I think we can extend it for 5 minutes. So I think we can. I think this is important. So we can kind of rush this for another 4 minutes,
okay,
and then we
okay.
probably take the question answers. Yeah.
Okay, all right. So this is how the before and after looks like. These were the walls which were all covered with years and years of plastering being done over them, lime washes being added to it, and once we remove them very patiently, giving our sweat and blood, and that's how the texture comes up. And this was another story that sort of revealed that all the barracks were built actually from the remains of the destroyed buildings of the Red Fort. So there were these big, so as Siddharth mentioned, that there were almost 80% of the buildings were broken down once the Britishers had taken over the Red Fort, and all those broken materials were used to build these barracks for the army. And it's all so visible, so neat and clean, and you're really able to enjoy the volumes and the spaces in the buildings. So this is how it was before, and then clearing out these arches and making bigger rooms and spaces that just talks. So the corridor spaces, of course, are the two dominating features of the entire building. And then while we were removing the plaster, these beautiful carved pieces became visible, and we suddenly started believing so much more in the story than we were before. So we had already read in the text that these are all broken parts, but once we saw these carved remains of the building, it just became so 100% more true and easy to believe. And I think that's what we want to also give the experience to the user and the visitor, because once they start looking at things and understanding the stories behind, they would really enjoy and get a larger perspective. And then looking at the services, so once we had taken out all the plaster, taking out all the unnecessary layers, we did not want to hide it under the services of the be it the lighting or the air conditioning system. And so intricately the conditioning was designed so that you see only the vents on the corridor ceilings, and no machines were visible. And then looking at lighting, how it could add value to the entire experience, grazing the brilliant texture that we had unraveled from the walls, to designing custom lighting, respecting the architectural language of the space, using the arch as the design language for the lighting as well, using red as the color of the monument, using concrete. So it was a very interesting gesture that we are using today's materials, but trying to use it in a contemporary format, but the form and the texture of it still remains as raw and original as the Red Fort itself. And then that's how you see the whole space getting transformed from the original to a bare structure, to adding lighting, the finishing, the flooring, everything onto it.
Yeah, and I think this is where I would like to add on that, this is what a practical or an office consultancy or a practice does. that the students' projects are of course very very informative, but they are on the conceptual level. But once you're on site, you need to be there. You need to feel that building. You need to go 100 times. You need to talk to different stakeholders to get to a solution. On day one, we were not knowing that we will do the building like that. It's a process. Once we discovered the building, we did 4 tests, and then we thought of doing the line or no line, and then we started exposing it. We took a call that exposed building is what it was earlier, and we should do the same. And nowhere in the Red Fort, in the earlier barracks, the exposed building has been done by ASI also. But it was important for us to change the norm now because we were able to do it. But the challenge here was that how to do that. So we thought of a technique which we will use, which will not take time, and that technique was not registered in India as a typology of conservation. So I think then the challenge was that how to make sure that we convince the authorities to do it. So this all comes with that practical, knowledge and going to the site and living at the site practically, and this looks beautiful now with the exposed stonework and how you lit up the overall space, how the lighting need to be hidden as a part of the skirting, etc. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think, Prashti, we can probably take it till here now, and then we can take some questions. So I, 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 I take this question here, which says that when we speak of heritage and conservation, there are only few monuments in India which come into picture, like Taj Mahal, Gateway of India, or Red Fort. But there are many more monuments which equally hold a lot of importance in Indian history. So how can we create awareness among the sent masses and expand the boundaries of heritage across different parts of India, as there are many discovered, undiscovered heritage places. Yeah. So yeah, so I think yeah, so I think this the question is very relevant. Uh, so I think we all need to do it. Uh, India is a very beautiful place that now we have gone above the roti kapda and makan, and then people are thinking of heritage and knowing the importance of heritage and evolving as people as culture. And this is the right time. I think we need to be responsible on kind of documenting all the heritage which is in your compound or which is in your city, and then taking it to the next level. Once you do that, it's a beautiful story which will come along, and then you will feel pride at the same time. You will learn a lot about the culture of that time, and it will evolve you as a person, as a human. Yeah, and then the next question comes in: what was the approach towards the Rumi Darwaza with its narrative of being a diamond necklace when seen inverted? Oof. I don't think, I think it's very important also to be very practical on, or to be, to be very adequate with your research. So I think we never got this narrative when we were doing the research on Rumi Darwaza. So if it would have been, we must have thought through. What practically the last or the most feasible thing we got to know was that Rumi Darwaza was actually the gate of Hossainabad, and they were identical Rumi Darwaza on the next side, on the opposite side of Hossainabad. And I remember going to an exhibition in London, which actually had the photographs of that Darwaza. So yeah, I think narrative as a term is very very important, but I think the narrative need to be right. Let's see, why don't you take the next question? It says, what do you think is the importance of outstanding universal value while trying to tackle a heritage renovation project? You're on mute, Prashasti.
Yeah. So I think outstanding, so I think heritage as a subject is so relevant, and I think the universal value that we are talking about, if I understand it from looking at an international example, then I think it's important to take inspiration from the universe, and but to be able to ingrain the Indianness into it is what's really important. And yeah,
I don't know what this question. Probably it can be about the universal design, where we talk about everybody kind of try to approach the building itself. So if it is about the universal design you're talking about, then I think it's very very important, very relevant, and a lot of heritage does not does that. And but you need to be very sensitive. Like we had huge fights of does the barracks of Red Fort, which are 3 story in high, should have lifts or not. So I think there's no customized solution to it, but you need to be very sensitive.
Yeah. So we had a question earlier which asked that so nowadays that fine line between getting inspired and copying is blurred. What's your take on that? That would you like to answer that?
Sorry, can you? What was the
Yeah. So
question?
the question is nowadays that fine line between getting inspired and copying is blurred. What's your take on that?
I think I will not try to answer this question directly, but indirectly. I think there will always be a boundary between, or blur boundary between copying and inspiration. I think you should try to do what you want. I think I've seen people doing the more construction side of the architecture, and I've seen people doing a lot of art side of architecture, and I think the boundaries are very blurred. The people doing the construction side of architecture also claim that they are the best architectural practices, and people doing the art side of architecture also claim. And I think some people see that as in the middle itself. So, but I think rather than fighting it out in your mind that what is copy and inspiration, I think you should try to do what you want. There are no right answers, and you should get inspired by people, and you should copy people also. So I think the both are same. It's just what is in you in your mind. But of course, copying design is something what I not mean here. So, for example, I give you a very famous example that Tadao Ando, one of the most famous architects of today's time, used to sketch in copy the Corbusier buildings because he was not a trained architect, and of course Corbusier was not himself. So he used to sketch his buildings because he was so much in love with those buildings. He was not knowing what he was doing, so he used to copy those buildings. But what he evolved as an architect right now is totally different. So I don't know, there should be a blur boundary or not, but I think one should practically try to do what he love or wishes to do. Yeah, I think we are good with time here. It's already 7:05, and we can end this here now.
Yeah. So I think the questions seem to be flowing, but I think we're just so sorry to take all the time for sort of
Yeah,
figuring out.
Presley, yeah,
Yeah.
you can try to answer the last question. In
Okay.
the times of economic,
In these times of economic debacles, heritage conservation could take a backseat as it could be seen as a luxury. So how could this revival be saved from dying out? So I think this is a question that we've been asking ourselves for a long time, and we've been trying to address it also in unique ways because I think the government, the authority, the people all are realizing that it is not dispensable. It is an indispensable part of our culture, and it is just not does not make sense to take care of it.
yeah, and I think I will probably try to add a twist to it. So, heritage is all about old buildings also being reused. So, why do you need to build new malls when you have beautiful old factories or heritage being there in the city itself? Try to reuse it and build your cafeterias and shopping experience in that. It will save you a lot of costs. At the same time, it's a pure delight not to go to a commercial mall rather than to go to that spaces. So I think this is up to one that how he or she looks at it.
Yeah.
All right, thanks Kedar. We got a thanks from Kedar. Right. Thank you.
Thank
Thank you
you.
everybody for coming, for joining. I think this is the time now to end this session. Thanks, Prashasti.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Bye.